Welcome to the Earth Feels podcast.
I'm Rose.
And I'm Christine.
Welcome to Earth Feels, the podcast for people feeling overwhelmed by the endlessly gloomy climate news.
Where every week we have soul-based conversations about climate change and explore the idea that climate change may be happening for us as much as it is happening to us.
If you are ready to shift your focus and secure the future for our kids and our grandkids, then this is the podcast for you.
And yes, we do know how to spell.
The one thing that gives me hope in the face of this impending climate crisis is the youth environmental movement. All across the globe, young people by the hundreds of thousands are embracing what science has been telling us since the early 1980s and taking to the streets. Not content with the lip service of their governmental leaders, our youth are demanding political courage and action to address climate change with the urgency it requires. Youth activists understand the consequences that every action or inaction taken in the next decade will have for the foreseeable future, not only for their lifetime, but for lifetimes, years in the future. They are the generation most at risk for the impacts of global warming and have, in fact, already inherited a world where drought, wildfire, fierce tropical storms, and flooding are ordinary occurrences. Wanting to understand their mindset, this month I reached out to Young Environmentalists and asked them to answer this same question. What do you want your elders to understand about the impending climate crisis? Here are their responses. First up, we have Farzana Farouk Jamul, who is 22 years old and works with Fridays of the Future in Bangladesh, where it is estimated 1 of every 7 people will be displaced by climate change by the year 2050, and 18 million people may need to relocate because of sea level rise alone.
Hello, I'm Farzana, a 22 years old climate activist based on Dhaka, Bangladesh. I'm currently working with Fridays for Future Bangladesh. Our elders need to know how they are causing climate crisis. We don't have so much time for them to understand everything and meanwhile destroying our future for another 10 years. In Bangladesh, our parents, grandparents don't want to learn from us, but we are suffering. Yes, our parents need to understand their reckless use of plastic and energy which causing the future blackout. And elders who are already have enough access of information and scientific research know that future crisis they are talking about is happening here. For climate crisis, you elders are to blame. If you want to know why, it's because you didn't vote. Or you did vote and elected someone who is as careless as you in terms of climate crisis. You don't need to save the world. You just understand your children or your younger or even your suffering.
Next, we have Katrin Hippmeyer from Austria. Austria, with its sensitive alpine regions, has been particularly hard hit by climate change already. The Austrian Climate Change Assessment Report of 2014, 7 years ago, says that the average temperature in Austria may have risen by almost 2 degrees Celsius since 1880. This is compared with a global rise of 0.85 degrees Celsius in the same period.
I want the elders to understand that climate crisis is a problem we have to face now and not in 10 years or later, because if we can't solve this problem, it will affect us all, and it won't be that we would be affected like for 2 years or 3 years. It's that everything would change, everything we know would change. Everyone thinks that it is something we can face in a few years, but That's what it's all about. We have to change our system now, really change our system, like the way we drive, the way we produce things, the way we produce energy and our consumption, what we buy and how many things we buy. That's all the things we have to change now and not in 15 or 20 years, because then it would be too late.
Our next youth activist is Sofia from Spain, where COP25 was held in 2019. The Mediterranean region of Spain has already warmed 1.5 degrees Celsius since the Industrial Revolution, and researchers have found that without mitigation, the regional temperature will be 2.2 degrees Celsius in 2040. Spain is already experiencing its worst wildfires in more than 20 years. Their summers are expected to warm more than the winters, creating periods of excessively hot weather to become more and more frequent. So think about this. If temperatures in the Mediterranean basin rise by 2 degrees Celsius, most of Spain and southern Europe would have a climate similar to that of current North Africa.
Hi, my name is Sofia Pravarenzana. I'm 17 years old. I'm from Spain, and I'm a climate reality leader at the Climate Reality Project. So firstly, I think that a common misconception is that climate change is only going to affect future generations. At the rate that we're going, our emissions will create irreversible change in less than 10 years. Yes, my generation foresees a future severely impacted by climate change, but so does yours. Educating yourself on its effects, especially in your own community, can be the first step to realizing the extent of the issue. And then secondly, it often seems as though climate activism is an extreme, like you either do everything or nothing at all. Something that I hear very often is stuff such as, yes, I'd become vegetarian to reduce my carbon footprint, but it's just such a commitment, and then nothing ends up happening. I mean, yes, restructuring your life is an amazing way to contribute to the fight against climate change, but you can start small too. Little actions amount to big change. Don't shield yourself by the belief that you won't be directly affected or that your individual actions won't matter. Do what you can, it'll help. The UN defines sustainability as satisfying the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations. But just remember that at this point, contributing to the climate crisis may compromise your own needs as well.
Next up, we have Isabel Sauter, a 17-year-old high school junior from the Bay Area of California. Isabel has a pretty extensive list of environmental projects that she has dedicated her energies towards, beginning in the 5th grade. And starting in June of 2021, she will be interning at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory under the supervision of Dr. Hannah Brunig, researching rocks that sequester carbon and how we might potentially use them to capture carbon on a mass scale. Isabel hopes to pursue a career in environmental science. Here's Isabel.
Hi, my name is Isabel Sauter. I'm 17 years old from the United States of America, and my organization is called Youth Power. What do I want my elders to understand about the impending climate crisis? This is a question I shouldn't have to answer. I'm a child. Children are supposed to have parents who take care of them, who love them, and are always there so they never feel alone. Why do your children feel so alone? Most adults seem genuinely hopeful that we will fix everything. They call my generation the generation of activists. They say we will bring about radical change, right the wrongs of the world, and start a new chapter in the book of humanity. They say we are the future. My dear parents, how can you tell us we are the future when you control our financial situation, our decision-making, our transportation, our state policies, and our rights to vote? Yes, the youth of the world have a strong voice, but we have almost no legal power. We can ask for change, but you can demand it. We can tell you what we think is right, but you can vote for it. We can ask you to buy an electric car or install solar panels or eat less meat, but you are the ones with the financial abilities to do so. You are the parents and we are the children. Prove to your children that you can be better by taking the initiative yourself, because we have something to tell you. We are not the future. You are.
Up next is Ghislaine Irkozy, a 21-year-old from Rwanda. He's the founder of Waste Zone app, whose mission is to reduce e-waste that ends up in landfills. So his mobile app connects households to recycling industries. So far, over 400 tons of e-waste have been transacted on Waste Zone, diverting and sequestering over 2,600 tons of carbon emissions just by creating communication. Simply genius. Here's Ghislaine.
Hi, my name is Gisle Ilakoze. I'm 21 years old. I'm based in Kigali, Rwanda, and I'm founder and CEO of Waste Zone. When I was 11 years old, I and my best friend survived a landslide accident. This incident has inspired me to set a vision of creating a waste-free world while mitigating climate change. I found the Waste Zone, a peer-to-peer platform that assists end consumers to transact their e-waste with recycling actors. So far, over 500 tons of e-waste have been transacted on Waste Zone app. The impending climate crisis is interlinked with continuous resource extraction, as well as generation of waste that is being continuously dumped in landfills or ending up in oceans, destroying marine life while also raising carbon emissions. Young generations should not inherit a toxic world. We are entitled to a climate-friendly world where economic prosperity goes in hand with planet sustainability. We strongly urge elders to take robust climate action, rethink their consumption habits to reduce waste generation, push further climate policies that make corporates accountable, and influence leaders to put in action their climate commitments. You owe it to your children as we will owe to our own in the future.
I'll include the link to Waste Zone app on the corresponding Earth Feels podcast page, as well as a couple of videos that feature Ghislaine. His app has gained some international recognition, and again, I think it's completely genius. Simple and genius. Next up, our sixth speaker is Connor Dunn, a 26-year-old environmental engineer from the Bay Area of California. Connor works on environmental restoration, implementing remedial design solutions for degraded soils throughout the United States. Oh, and Connor is my youngest son.
Hi, this is Connor Dunn. I am a 26-year-old environmental engineer in California and the son of this podcast's host. What do I want my elders to understand about the impending climate crisis? Well, I would say the number one thing is urgency. I know I'm probably speaking to the choir with this podcast audience, but this is a problem that's not off in the future. It's here. It's impacting people's lives now. There's tremendous suffering that's already underway. And unfortunately, if we don't stop our current path, it's just the beginning. I think this is a problem that really requires global cooperation and a global mindset that my generation, maybe unlike previous generations, has a unique capability of viewing it through that lens. And I think it's important that we stop pointing fingers at each other, whether it's intergenerationally or internationally, and roll up our sleeves and just get to work on these solutions, because we don't have time anymore for division on this topic. It requires all of us to work together and to work together now.
I have long believed our stories are our most potent medicine. My next guest represents Our Climate Voices, a youth climate storytelling nonprofit whose mission is to humanize the climate crisis, bringing the voices of those most affected by this existential problem to the forefront. Kiana, at 23 and a woman of color, believes addressing the link between the climate crisis and every social justice issue is of paramount importance. Welcome, Kiana.
My name is Kiana Michon. I use she, her pronouns. I am from unceded Lenape land in New York City, and I'm with the youth-led organization Our Climate Voices. I believe that intergenerational work within the climate justice movement is crucial. I want elders to know that I respect the work of the environmental activists, scientists, policymakers, writers, and creatives that have come before my time. As a relatively young person, I think that the visceral emotional experience of the climate crisis has a different weight to it when it encompasses your entire future. There is a collective grief at the strong possibility of having a future and life so colored by climate disaster. That said, the climate crisis also disproportionately impacts elders. Thus, the stake remains high across all ages. Climate inaction continues to blatantly disrespect and disregard our livelihoods and our lives. The emotional impact of the climate crisis is certainly felt throughout all generations. Those older have already witnessed the greatest amount of environmental change within their lifetimes. There is deep wisdom and emotion in all of our experience of the earth across all ages. I want my elders to know that I hope that we can continue to work together to address the urgency of the climate crisis within an intergenerational framework of knowledge and perspectives. Rather than be separated by our differences, let us be connected in our care for each other and our care for the earth.
Kristen Ho is a 12-year-old Asian American, born and raised in the Bay Area of California. Her observations about the natural world during the pandemic strike me as especially poignant. What lessons have we learned from Mother Nature as we have been forced to slow down while sequestered in our homes? And how can we take those lessons and apply them to the climate crisis? Kristen is active in a young environmentalist group called Youth Power, We Can, in the Bay Area. Here's Kristen.
During shelter in place, my desk faced the window to our backyard. In between my virtual classes, I would look outside, watching the squirrels dart up and down our old oak tree, birds chirping and hopping about, and the occasional deer hidden near the creek. On September 9th, the sky was red-orange in San Francisco Bay Area due to wildfires. Ash fell from the sky and made me think of the last days of Pompeii. Not only was I trapped learning at home with Zoom fatigue, now I couldn't even go outside because of the poor air quality. I'd known about climate change, but I thought it was a far-off thing that wouldn't happen in years. I realize now that climate change can't be ignored much longer. It's closer than we think. Why can't we all come together, make a simple checklist of what can be fixed, check each box off to restore kindness, gratitude, and teamwork to replace the selfish attitudes that we are suffering from now? We need to stop using gasoline-fueled cars, use wind power, solar power, and water power. We need to restore nature by planting trees and preserving open spaces. The little ant in my backyard believes in the greater good by bringing food back to his colony to share. Our majestic oak tree shelters small animals like birds, squirrels, insects, and provides acorns and shade for everyone. Why can't humans love, respect, and be grateful for Mother Earth? I want our beautiful trees, animals, and creeks to still be here for future generations to enjoy.
Jacob Ewert is a third-year plant science student at the University of Florida who plans to go into science education once he graduates. He's an advocate of science literacy and enjoys educating people of all ages about the environment. Here's Jacob.
Hello, my name is Jacob Ewert. I am 21 years old from the United States and have worked closely with the Youth Environmental Alliance. This organization is a South Florida nonprofit that works to engage citizens of all ages in local restoration efforts and more. Here is my answer to the given question. So as environmental awareness becomes more commonplace, I've noticed a disconnect between what my generation believes and the mindsets of both my parents' and grandparents' generations. They just didn't grow up with hearing about the climate crisis as much as we have. And it is for this reason that I wished my elders would understand that what we are doing now just isn't enough. It's a little frustrating. The climate crisis isn't a result of just one localized issue, but multiple compounding issues. Although this doesn't make fighting it seem any less daunting, with hundreds of environmental organizations around the country, online resources, local outreach events and activities, how could you not be inclined to make small adjustments to your life if it means a better life for future generations? Get involved with a local organization, go volunteer somewhere, make the switch from plastic to more reusable materials, use the car less often. The solutions aren't very complicated, but time and time again, I find older generations being a bit dismissive of these lifestyle changes. We must remember that although there are groups taking initiative, it isn't enough. Although people are raising awareness, it isn't enough. The younger generations on this planet can do as much as they can, but it's simply not enough. And it's absolutely not enough for more aware citizens to find new ways to solve a global issue while those who miss the simpler times are reluctant to help. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to every individual within older generations, as there are those involved with local, state, and national issues. Some are leading research labs working on alternative materials to plastic, some are working for conservation nonprofits, and some are doing what they can at home. But my question is, why stop there?
Last but not least is Jens Peterson, 19 and a rising sophomore at Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is my alma mater. Jens is the author of What We Leave, A Caretaker's Guide to an Ill Planet. His dystopian vision, entitled If We Do Nothing, was featured as Best in Climate in episode 151. Additionally, Jens and I spoke in episode 152 surrounding the question, how can we become environmentalists? Once again, here's Jens.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jens Peterson. I'm 19 years old, and I'm the author of the book What We Leave, A Caretaker's Guide to an Ill Planet. One thing I want older generations to understand is that this crisis is not something that we can solve by just recycling more, and it is not the fault of the consumer. Climate change is a systemic issue, and it can only be solved with systemic solutions. The longer our government holds out on taking real climate action, the more radical our youth protests will get, and we will not stop fighting until we see real change. So what is real change, and how can we help bring it about? Well, it's all about staying informed so you can support the youth rallies for climate. My number one recommendation is to stop looking at politics as who supports what policy and start researching the policies themselves. For example, you may know that Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi don't support the Green New Deal. But do you know what the Green New Deal actually is? Most bills and resolutions are available to read for free online. Once you're better informed, you are much more prepared to effectively demand change. Stay informed, stay active, and listen to what youth have to say about our future. Because you can bet we're doing the research.
There's a term in the spiritual psychology and mental health fields known as fierce listening, which means essentially listening so deeply that you hear not only what is being said, but actually what is not being said as well. It's a listening done that encompasses your heart space, in addition to merely your ears and your brain. It's a listening done without the need to respond, but rather to allow the individual to be heard and ideally to feel understood. Fiercely listening to these 10 young people, their emotion is raw and their suffering palpable. Theirs is a great grief, as Kiana so eloquently expresses. There is anger, fear, the uncertainty of a life lived in a rapidly deteriorating environment. And at the core, a deep sense of betrayal that those who have come before them are mostly nonchalant regarding the consequences of our refusal to believe and act on the science. This is their reality. Further compounding their frustration, it seems they must stand by without the financial resources or political power to change the trajectory of what is unfolding before them. Their only power is in their voice, in their ability to persuade or inspire millions currently enraptured in the status quo. The clock is ticking, and the urgency is real. These young people are fighting for their future and the future of unborn generations that will follow them. They are fighting for their very lives. And so the question becomes, do we care enough to collectively shift our focus to the earth that will be left for our children and our grandchildren? Tick tock. Time will tell. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.
That's this week's episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for me.